Welcome to Worship Tutorials. In this video, I want to show you the ultimate AxeFX3 preset. At least for my usages, this is like the live preset that I am currently using. For what I do in church, mostly praise and worship type stuff, I think it gets literally everything out of the AxeFX3 that I can possibly get out of it, and it does everything that I want it to do. So this is going to be a long video. There are timestamps below where you can jump to different sections of the video. What you see on the screen here is sort of my live template that I use, that I build song presets out of. We're going to build it from scratch. So we're going to go through the whole process, every block, why I choose the things that I choose in each block. As you can see, I have an FC12 controller in front of me on the floor, 2 expression pedals. I'll talk about why we're using both of those expression pedals. And we're going to talk about all this per preset mapping, the FC mapping that goes into it. So this can kind of be like, if you use our presets, this video can show you sort of a deep dive into how everything is set up exactly. Or if you're just interested in AxeFX3, or the Fractal ecosystem, it can show you what it's capable of, at least the way I use it. Okay, a few things up front. This is an AxeFX3 Mark II. I am on firmware 26.01, so this is not a turbo unit. If you have the original AxeFX3, the first one that was released, this is the DSP that you get. Of course, if you buy the turbo, you get more DSP. I have the FC12 connected to AxeFX3 via XLR. So all you need is a regular old XLR cable that supplies power to the FC12, and then I've got the 2 expression pedals, and they're just plugged into the FC12. A little of my history with AxeFX3, I'm just going to say it. Fractal, specifically AxeFX3, is my favorite all-in-one modeling unit. Hands down, not even close. The effects are unbelievable. The flexibility that you're going to see what we're going to do with programming is second to none. I think the thumbnail of this video probably said something like, this modeler does things no other modeler can do. I think that it sounds the best out of anything. Now, you could debate whether or not capture technology like ToneX sounds better. I love all of it. I run my pedal board into ToneX pedals, into amps. I use Helix, I use AxeFX, I use FM9. AxeFX3 is my jam. It's my main thing that I use live. All right, so let's jump into it. This is what we're going to recreate. This looks a bit complicated, but I'll go through everything. So let's hop into a fresh preset, shall we? All right, so the first thing you have to do if you're brand new to AxeFX or Fractal, this is AxeFX3, AxeEdit 3. The editor for FM9 looks pretty much the same. The editor for FM3 looks the same. You just have fewer of these blocks in this grid. And each of these blocks can house a block. Each of these spaces can house a block. If you right click, you can see all these different blocks, right? So one thing that's different about Fractal than like line 6, for example, is AxeFX3 gives you 2 amp blocks. So there's 1 and 2. Within each of these blocks, you have 4 channels. So you can have amp 1 and you can have 4 different. I'll show you this in a bit, but you're limited how many, like say you want to run 5 delays at the same time. You can't do that because if you go to the delay block, you only have 4 delays. So you can only run 4 at the same time. And then the different FM units scale down. So like FM3, for example, only lets you run 1 amp at a time. So you're limited by, you know, drive blocks. If you want 5 overdrive blocks, you can't. You only can have 4. But within each of these blocks, you have 4 channels. So you can have, technically, you can have 16 different overdrive options at your disposal that you can switch between. So let's build out a signal chain. You have to sort of build it all from scratch initially, or you can, of course, come to one of the stock presets and work from there. But we're going to start from blank. So the first thing you need is an input. We're going to do input 1. So I know the way I like to build presets, I'm going to connect all of these blocks. This is almost like a cable. You went here to here and it connected all the blocks together. I'm going to then do a send and return. So it's essentially just going to elongate this signal chain, right? So I'm going to go feedback send. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go feedback return. So the send is now sending. There are no parameters on the send. It just sends the signal. Then you've got the return, and you have to do what you want with the return level. We're going to make it 100%. So that means that my 100% of the signal that was sent out of the send block comes into the return block. And then I'm just going to connect it all the way down. So this is going to be our signal chain. We can add different effects and things to any of these blocks, and it'll be in the chain. Then I'm going to add an output block here, input, output. I'm using output 1 on my Axe-Fx. Like if you're using multiple outputs, you can just create another little cable up here and make this output 2 or 3 or 4, or whatever you want. I'm going to set this preset up so that I'm running stereo amps at the end of the chain. One thing I always like to do though is I like to have a volume boost, a pure volume boost at the end. So I'm just going to put the volume block, I'm going to put volume 2 in because we're going to use volume 1 up here for the actual expression pedal. So, and this is a stereo block. You don't have to tell it that it's stereo, it just is if you have stereo signal coming into it. I'm going to make this a 1.5 dB boost. So we can turn that on if we want. It's at the very end, so anything that comes into it just gets louder. That was a weird thing to put first, but here we are. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the amp block. So I'm going to add amp 1 here. I'm going to add amp 2 here. Now they're in a stereo configuration, so I'm just going to connect these cables and bring it in. Now what's going to happen is the signal, you just think of these lines as a signal flow. So signal is going to flow, it's coming here, it's going to flow. I don't want dry signal to flow through between the amps, so I'm going to delete this block. So now what's going to happen is the signal comes here, it splits, and it goes into stereo, into the amps. And then I'm going to bring a cab block in. Now the thing about the Fractal cab blocks is you can set them up for stereo. So you don't have to set like one here and then bring them together. So we're going to add cab 1. So now what we have is amp 1, amp 2, cab 1. I'm going to jump into the library folder, or the Fractal block library, and pull in my favorite settings. So the way the library works is you can say you're going to dial this amp in and it looks like this. I don't know, this is kind of like how I like to run this AC30 Brilliant. You can save this as a setting. You can call it Brian's AC30 settings without playing it. Brian's AC30, so you have a limit on how many you can go. You can save just channel A, or you can save the whole block, all the channels. You save it into the library, and then you can always recall it. I'm going to pull in blocks that I know I've already set up. We're going to go Brian's live amp V2, which is what we're working off here. AC30 Brilliant. All right, so first of all, you have all these tabs on the left side. The tone tab are the controls that you actually see on the actual amp. So if all you want to do is dial in the amp with the onboard controls that exist on the real amp, the only thing you have to look at is this tone knob. People say that Fractal is option paralysis with all this stuff. You don't even have to touch it if you don't want to. So this is the gain of the amp. This is kind of where I like it. The bass, the treble, and the cut. So this is an AC30 on the Brilliant channel. If you're familiar with that amp, those are the controls you get. Then I'm going to set these up how they would be stock. So here we have like the fractal output section. You got the overall level of the amp. This will not change the tone. It's just the pure level of the amplifier. And then, or of this amp block. And then you have the balance. Now this is our left amplifier, so we need to send it left. And then we're going to tell it what it's going to input. I only want it to input the left side of the signal. And then on the right side, we're going to do the opposite panning. So let's just set up our right amplifier, which I've got saved right here. So we've got V2, it's a Chieftain. So this is a matchless Chieftain setup. And here are the controls that you would see on a Chieftain. Now I have both of these amps in the real world, and this is what they give you. On the Chieftain, there's like there's a few differences because the high cut is actually the brilliant control on the Chieftain, and it works backwards in here, but if you get your mind around that, it's pretty easy to understand. So this is how I honestly set up my Chieftain for real, and it sounds great. Now you'll notice that my balance on this bottom amp on the right is to the right, and its input, the input that it's receiving is only the right side. So what that means is, like, if you have a stereo delay that's like a dotted eighth left and a quarter note right, the dotted eighth to the left is going to go to this amp, and the quarter note right is going to go to that amp. This keeps your stereo imaging all the way through. So for the cabs, we're going to pull in Brian Live V2. This is the only thing in this preset that is not stock. What I'm using here are impulse responses that you can get from worship tutorials linked below of my 1964 Vox AC30 with the original old 64 silver Alnico silver speakers. So, you know, I've just pulled in, here I am in the user. You can see some of these IRs that we have available. They're all in my Axe-Fx. So I'm using a 121, and it's going to be panned left. And then I'm using a TF51, which is a condenser microphone, Telefunken, and it's panned right. I really like that Telefunken on guitar cabs. It sounds big. So here is the bass tone. This is stereo AC30 left, Chieftain right. Let's hop into these blocks and show you what they all do. We're gonna go just on the AC30. Now, one cool trick you can do with Axe-Fx is in the cab block, you can say input mode is currently stereo, so it's inputting from both amps. I want to just edit this AC30, and I want to just hear that AC30. You can just tell it, I want to only hear the left side, the left input being the AC30. So now, when we play, we'll hear the AC30 and we can edit and only the AC30. I don't remember where it was, so we're gonna get that set up here in a bit. First of all, let's mess with some of the controls that you get on the tone page. So that's as much gain as this AC30 has, and it gets really woofy at the bottom, or at the top of the gain, so you would want to adjust some things. But let's go back to where I had it. All right, given my experience with AC30s, that sounds like a really good one to me. And again, it's going through, right now you're hearing the AC30 through both of these IRs. When you go back to stereo mode, it actually only goes through the 121, and then the Chieftain goes through the 51. But you get the idea. Now, we can tweak further. Now, if there are things that you hear and you're like, I don't like that, and you can't get it, you know, where you want it on the tone page, you can hop to the ideal page, which gives you a lot more controls. All the Fractal amp models have these pages, so you can turn a fat switch on. You can, you know, change the high treble, the depth. I typically don't mess with this. unless there's something that I hear in the amp that I don't like, that I can't change on the tone page. And that goes for all of these tabs except the last two, which we'll talk about. So these are here if you really want to tweak, or if you think, you know, like if you're using a Plexi and there's a popular mod that you want to do, you can recreate it in these pages, in these tabs. The input trim can be nice if you've got an amp or you've got pickups that are high output and they're pushing the amp too hard. So a lot of times with these amps, the gain knob, the amp sort of wakes up at a certain point. And if that is too much gain for you, like if this is kind of where this amp wakes up, I'll show you. Sounds kind of weak and wimpy here. You can hear around 3 on the gain. It's like the amp just comes alive, right? But say you want it cleaner, you can take this input trim down. It's almost like plugging into a low input on an amp like this matchless right here. The Clubman has a high and a low input. You can replicate that. So you can bring the input trim down. It sort of keeps that amp's magical thing going with the gain, but gives you less, it feeds less like signal into it, really. So that can be a very handy trick, especially with amps that are gainier, that if you want to use them a little cleaner, you can do that. But I like keeping it here for this amp. I think we were right around here. So these are the ideal tab. The preamp tab gives you some really interesting options. You can select a boost. You got all these options for the boost. It can be like an AC, like a exotic AC, a tube screamer. So you can set a boost up. Let's just turn it on, show you what it does. And then you can map this. Anything with a little circle underneath it means you can map that parameter to a controller, whether that's your FC controller or any MIDI, anything. So you can then have your a boost built into the amp block, so you don't actually need. You can have a 5th overdrive if you want it. Okay, so you can come into the power amp section. You can change all this kind of stuff. I don't usually mess with this. You can change the tube types. You can change, you know, the power supply, speaker. Now the speaker section is actually a really, when you get to these last 4, you can make some big changes. So they have impedance curve modeling. So if you know about, you know, that's a big deal when it comes to these amps. It'll change the feel a lot. So you can change it. You can, so right now it's set to auto. You can turn it off and then you can select. Like I said, if I don't hear something I specifically want to change, I don't go into these tabs to change it. And if I do hear something I specifically want to change, you can start to mess with it and tweak. Okay, so the last 3 sections are where you can really change the way these amps sound. A lot of amps are a little bass heavy, and like, you know, coming down to the bass and turning it down doesn't do what you want it to do, really. So you can come into the input EQ, and this is going to change the EQ of the signal before it hits the amp. And a lot of times what you can do is you can institute a low cut. Super powerful, you know, EQ move that you can use. And you can do this depending on guitar as well. Like if you have pickups that are really bassy on certain models, you can cut the lows out with this. You can also add a boost at any point. And then of course you can map this to a controller. We'll talk about that in a bit when we start mapping things. But the input EQ section is powerful. The output EQ section, equally powerful. You can see I'm using it on this amp block. These are the moves I've made on the output EQ. First of all, you have all these different EQ types, which I love because not all EQ sounds the same. And I like this 5-band passive. I found some documentation somewhere that talked about what these are based on. The 5-band passive EQ is based on a vintage console EQ, like an SSL or an API. I can't remember which one, but I really like the way it sounds. I like the frequency choices that are made here. You can use any of these. You can use a 3-band console, gives you less options, and it emulates a different console. The 5-band Mark comes from the Mesa Boogie Mark series amplifiers. We use that one in the Helix all the time, actually. I like the 5-band passive. I'm going to turn it on and off. You can hear what it does. It's going to give a volume boost when it comes on, so don't let that fool your ears. So you can hear it just kind of sweetens everything. The last thing that I do on the amp block, we're not going to spend this much time on every block. This video would be forever long. But the amp block's important. I go to the gain and I go to the output compressor section. Typically it's set on, I think, output or maybe feedback. I think it's output. Either way, and the compression is set at 0. So this adds compression on the output of the amp. I don't typically change these values, but what I do is I go to gain enhancer and then I start to bring it up just a little, like it's usually around 0.5. It's not much of a move. It does make a difference in the way the amp feels and responds. And here, I love how Fractal adds this. You can see how much gain reduction you're getting based on this EQ setting, or this compression setting. To me, usually it's around 0.5-ish, 0.6. It makes the amp just feel a little bit like, you feel it under your fingers when you play. It compresses the amp a little more, so it like makes the amp... it responds to gain a little different, actually kind of adds a little bit of gain to the amp itself, but in a way that I really like. I don't always use it depending on the amp, but I really like it. Before we move on, there is a tool that Fractal gives you that is super useful. You go to Tools and you go to Preset Leveling. So this is how I basically set up my amp block level. Now you'll see I've got amp 1 level, amp 2 level, and then output 1. Right where this line changes from black to red, that's what I want to hit at my clean-ish setting. You can see I'm a little loud, so I'm going to pull it back to minus 8.5. -9 is where I want to live. We could go through the whole thing with the Chieftain block, but it's all sort of the same thing. One thing I'll show you, though, is right now we're only hearing the AC30 through these two cabs. You can switch this to hear the Chieftain through these two cabs, and you can hear the difference in the two amps. They sound fairly different. They both have like a brilliance and a bit of a chime to them. AC30, of course, has more of a classic AC30 chime. They work really well together. So here they are, one at a time and then in stereo. We can go back to our preset leveling thing and make sure that they're coming in at the same level. They're actually both kind of a little bit loud, so I'm going to take them both down by 1 dB. You can see these two amplifiers have a similar level of compression, how they kind of both you know, come down at the same level. So this is a good pairing of amplifiers. Now, a few things about the cab block. So here you've got low cuts and high cuts that you can put on either of the two IRs individually. You can set individual levels and panning. So you can see I got the 121 pan left, TF51 right. If you come to the more section, you can have the proximity and the smoothing. So the proximity is going to add more low information to them. You can have IR length. Now there's a reason, and I'll talk about it in a bit toward the end when we talk about DSP. I'm only at 512. It uses less DSP. You can see with 2 amps and a stereo cab block, we're at 19% CPU usage. Okay, there's a preamp section that you can use or not, so you can add, this will add DSP. You can add these different types of preamps, what the quality level. You can add drive and saturation to the preamp. This will emulate running your, you know, cab mics into a Neve 1073 type of a preamp if you want to do that. I don't typically do that. There's a tone block, and that's for the preamp itself. So if you have none selected, none of these controls are going to do anything. Okay. Then you've got low and high cut filters. That is for the overall amp block. So I'm not cutting any low. I suppose I could if I wanted to, you know, cut 50 hertz. High cut, I'm doing around 7,000, a little over. Okay. Then you've got level and balance of the entire cab block if you want to do that. And here you still have access to your input modes and output. You can change the bypass mode as well. So when you turn it off, do you want the signal to be muted, or do you want the raw amp signal to go pass through when you turn it off? There's a room and air section. I actually like this a lot. The room gives you, it's almost like a very short room reverb. And air is like, it adds, I don't know exactly what it does. It just kind of sweetens things. I've read that it passes a little bit of the dry signal through, but I don't actually hear it doing anything like that. I will run these around 5%. If you push them hard, they can sound weird. So I don't do that. Finally, you have an alignment tab. So if you have impulse responses from different manufacturers and they don't quite line up, you can, if they're like, you know, like this, you can align them. Now we make all our IRs the same, and then you can zoom in and out to see. So they always line up, and we try and set them up so they line up with other manufacturers' IRs as well. But you can change that if you'd like. One thing that I don't see in here is you cannot flip phase of an individual IR. So if you have IRs that are out of phase, you are out of luck in this cab block. You can also load an impulse response block, but I really like all these controls that you get that you can then apply to IRs. It really is a lot of flexibility. Now let's start adding effects. So the first thing I like to add is a compressor at the beginning of the chain. So we're going to add compressor 1, and I have some go-to compression settings. So I'm just going to call it my 1176 setting. Actually, I think it's this is it, 1176. Maybe the subtle one. No, I like this one. I can tell by the controls. I have auto attack and release time. I don't, usually I push it a little bit, but back off the mix. So this emulates sort of like a parallel-ish compression. Let me show you what it sounds like on and off. So here's off. you can really hear what it's doing, like when I picked lightly, it brought that up and fed more of that into the amps, so the amps sort of treated that like more in their sweet spot. But when I played big, we're not pushing the amps super hard with a lot of output from the compressor. I would call this like a subtle type of a compression, and it's a feel thing, and it really helps when you're playing lightly in different scenarios like that, especially with a lot of effects. It's nice. Okay, I like to run a pitch block next, so I like to do one thing specifically, and that is a whammy. So we'll talk about how I got that set up. I'm just going to put the block in and turn it off for now. Let's go to overdrives. I like to run 2 overdrive blocks. You have 4 available. I like to run 2 of them. So I'm going to put them both in. Drive 1, drive 2. Now, drive 1 is like my lower gain drive, and I like to stack it with things. And I typically, there's a lot of different, we'll set up a few options in here. We can audition them. So in my library, I've got some go-to settings. I like the Morning Glory low gain a lot, so we're going to use it. They put the JHS Morning Glory in the Fractal stuff. I love the King of Tone. I have a King of Tone. I love it. So we're going to go the yellow side of the King of Tone. You know, we can try out, sometimes a Timmy is nice for low gain stuff. Yeah, Timmy low gain. And what else can we do? Well, here are all the options. So let's go just from scratch and pull one more in. Let's run like an 8. Is the AC booster or the RC booster the lower gain? The exotic. We're about to find out, because here's an AC booster. So one thing you've seen is how channels are set up in a block. So this is drive 1. Within drive 1, you have access to all the overdrives. There are 69 different overdrive algorithms. Some of them, like the Timmy, takes up 3 because it's an algorithm for each switch on the clipping switch. So you got the up, down, mid. You know, so some of them take up more than one. Like the Morning Glory, for example. Where is the Sunrise Splendor? You've got this, or with the high cut switch engaged. So there are not almost 70 drives in here. There are over 50 probably. Lots of overdrives. Actually, a Jan Ray is a fun one. We could work with that in Block B. Then each channel then has access to all of these drive options. So you can have one overdrive block and set up low gain channel A, mid gain channel B, high gain channel C, fuzz in channel D, and you can use one drive block to get all of your drive sounds, assuming you don't want to stack them, because you can only run one channel at a time. That's the reason I like 2 drive blocks, is because I often like to stack 2 drives together. So this gives me the option to do that. So let's just hear some of these things. First of all, we'll run clean with compression, and then we'll turn on our Morning Glory, Sunrise Splendor. I like the Jan Ray. That's pretty cool. So you heard there, we've got 4 different channels of low gain drive setup. They all sound pretty different. The Morning Glory has a lot. I like the low end, the low mid range in it with these 2 amplifiers. So drive 1 is set up, in my opinion. I'm actually only going to really use just this one channel. Now, these, again, you've got this basic tab, which is the controls that you would see on the actual pedal. Not all the blocks are set up this way, but the drive and the amp blocks are. So like the Jan Ray, you've got gain, bass, and treble, and then level. Every drive block lets you mix, so you can like have a clean blend on every single drive if you want it. And then let's jump into the different tabs. So the tone tab, you can completely change the frequency, you know, the EQ of the drive. Now, when they come in, when you pull these in, Fractal has sort of, if there are settings on these, like the graphic, let's find one where there's a tone setting, like here on the Timmy, low gain, there's like a low cut set. Fractal will do preset moves based on how they model the actual pedals to emulate them. So you don't have to come into these tabs if you don't want to, unless you hear something you don't like. Now, one thing you could do, like on some of these, like the King of Tone had a mid push, and say you don't want the mid push, you could either pull mids out here, or you could come into the graphic EQ and start pulling mids out. I mean, I'm making some drastic moves here. So let's listen to what that sounds like on, off, and then on. I actually didn't mind it, because when I heard it, it felt like there were, you know, it kind of felt like, I don't know if I like it. You can double click these to get them back. And you can hear the mid push come back in. So you can really change things. Now, if you go to the advanced tab, you can change the diode types, how many. You can change the bass response of the pedal. Lots of stuff if you like to tweak. I like to think of it as this kind of like modding a pedal or modding an amplifier. If I had an amp, I probably wouldn't open it up and start changing capacitors and things like that. But in the digital realm, you can do it. All right, let's move on to drive 2. These are going to be my bigger drive sounds. I love the ODR1 models in these units, the Fractal unit and the line, you know, the Helix. The ODR1 is great. So I'm going to set up ODR1 for my mid gain sound. This is sort of my preset, you know, the way I like to run it. You can see exactly what I've done. We're going to go clean and then turn it on. Love it. Okay. I don't really mess with these tabs unless, again, there's something I don't like that I want to fix. Now let's go and give us an 808 mid-gain drive. Let's try this one. I like the Max On. They call it the Max Off, but it's the Max On 808. It's a really good sounding overdrive. You can really hear it doing this, right? That's what a cool 808 is going to do. Now, on channels C and D, I actually use A, C, and D on Block 2 a lot. A and B are kind of like two different flavors of like my main rhythm sound. C, I like to bring in an OCD, so it's a distortion. So I've got some drive and distortion, and let's listen to that. OCD is just a great sounding pedal. And then in channel D, I like to use fuzz. Sometimes it's fun to pull in a fuzz. I'm really into the tone bender type fuzz in here. So I'm gonna play it clean and show you the fuzz. It's a great sounding fuzz. Now, you might ask yourself, you got a big fuzz going on and it's perfectly silent. That's because the input block, by default, has a noise gate turned on. You can turn it off. Now you hear psh, right? But I like to keep it on. You know, it's nice to have things nice and clean. If you find that it messes with your playing or your set, you can always just turn it off. It's nice that it's built into the input block. The Helix does this too. The next thing we're gonna do really is some wet effects, some modulation, some reverb, some delay. Let's start with modulation. Let's pull in a chorus here. So in the chorus block, I'm just gonna fill it with things that I like. Look at all these chorus options you've got. Many chorus options. I really like a tri-chorus. So I've got that saved in my library, and then I like a dimension chorus. I like the dimension chorus with drive. I find it gives you that 80s thing, but I'll show you another trick for that coming up in the pitch block. And then I really like this setting that we've made called Retro Reel. It emulates like the Line 6 retro reel using the dimension chorus. And then finally, let's do a, where is it? Vibrato. There's not a vibrato block in, in Fractal's ecosystem. There have been many people asking for a vibrato block. You go down to V, there's vocoder and volume, but you can get it with the chorus block. So let's just listen to these. And this is in stereo. So basically our stereo split kind of starts right here. So this is the tri-chorus. Super lush. We'll jump to the dimension. Finally, here's some vibrato. Modulation effects are so fun. Every one of these has the basic tab, which gives you similar effects. These are not recreations of particular pedals. These are just, these types are like going after different types of choruses, and they're adding new stuff all the time with firmware updates. So, you've just got all these, the tri-chorus is going to give you like some of the things that you'll see on a tri-chorus type of a pedal, like left, right, and center depth, master depth, that kind of thing. Dimension is going to give you some of the things you would find on like a Boss Dimension chorus, but they're not going to line up exactly like to a pedal. So many of the effects are like this. And then each one has a tone tab as well, where you've got drive, high, and low cut on each one. Of course, they all have mix, level, balance, and stereo spread options. And then you've got your bypass mode. What happens when you turn it off? Well, the signal goes through. So you don't want to mute your dry signal when you turn it off. Next, let's do delay. So for delays and reverbs, I really like to run things in parallel. We're going to add delay 1. I usually run 2 delay blocks. Delay 1, delay 2. We've got these 2 blocks set up, above and below the main signal path. And so what you do then is you just take a cable and connect them, a digital cable, and connect these. So now our signal comes to the chorus block, and then it goes 3 different places. It goes up to delay 1, down to delay 2, and then through. So this is going to allow the original signal to pass through. This is like, you could think of this like pedals that have, dry through, I think is what they call it. Analog dry through. You could think of it that way. First of all, let me show you how many delays you have. You've got 20. These are based on, some of them based on real world delays, like a 2290. Some of them are, recreations of tape delays. The graphite copy is a carbon copy, MXR. Some really good stuff in here. And then you can choose any of these and set them up any way you want. I'm going to pull in some of our preset library sounds. I like an 1/8 analog, and then I've got it set pre and post. That means before and after the amp. So this is how I have the delays. Let's go through each section here. First of all, you can align it to tap tempo. It is aligned to my tap tempo as an 1/8 note. You can turn this off and then set it up via milliseconds, but that's not what I want for these delays. You got the master time if you want to set that to 100% if you want it to stay on tap tempo. I appreciate how the left and right feedback, we're in the analog stereo algorithm here. The left and right feedback are tied together in this block. You can change the ratio here if you want. If you change this ratio, you're going to get like different delay sounds on either side, right? So you can take these delays and make them stereo that way. So I'm going to keep it like right around 100%. If you back off of 100% just a little bit, it kind of widens things out. It's like they're milliseconds apart on either side, which is a nice effect. You don't really hear it on a fast delay like this, but on a slower delay, you would. This section right here will determine how the signal routing goes. So because we are in a parallel situation, our dry signal is passing through. We want to kill the dry signal out of the delay. Otherwise, it's going to add the dry signal again and everything is going to get way louder. So if that happens to you, that's why. You can kill the dry signal here because we're in this parallel setup, and then the mix control just mixes how much you want. So I'm going to bump it down to 80 BPM. Here's where you can tap it in up here if you want, or you can just right click and select. There you can actually hear the difference. It's a little more than I would want. Maybe you're at 98%. Yeah, okay. You can change the spread, the stereo spread. You can change the balance. You can change the overall level of the delay out in the mix. Mix is set very low here, as you can see, but it's giving me what I want. If you want it to match your dry signal, I think you'd go to 50% on this delay anyway. You're never gonna get like like 100% wet unless you go in parallel or in series. So I don't have anything that's able to do like 100% wet with this type of setup. And then finally, the bypass mode is you can mute effect. I set these up to mute effects in. There's a Fractal wiki, you know, that really explains what this does. But what that means is like you get trails when you turn it off. I didn't get there fast enough, but it gives you trails when you turn it off. Some of these other bypass types will not allow the trails to pass through. Mute effects in does. I think you can also just use mute in, and it does the same thing. Yeah, but I do mute effects in. Typically, I'll leave this on just channel A, but in channel B, I'll do a couple different options for eighth note delay. So I've got the analog. Let's do an eighth note tape. So this is using the stereo tape algorithm. I like the analog because it's a little warmer. You can change the tape sound, and I'll show you some of these different parameters. Now I'll also set up quarter note delays here if I want to use a quarter note delay. So let's do a quarter note tape, quarter note analog. Where is that? Quarter analog. Look, I want pre. And then quarter tape. So basically what I've got now is I've got an eighth note analog, eighth note tape, eighth note, quarter note analog, quarter note tape. Let's move on to delay block 2. This is where I have like dotted eighth delays and stereo delays. So we're going to set up our dotted eighth delay. The main dotted eighth delay that I like to use is the Deluxe Memory Man. I love the way this sounds, the way they did like the modulation on it. You hear wow, wow. It does like the mod thing on the repeats. That sounds really, really good. I've never owned a legit Deluxe Memory Man, but I like the way they sound in the digital realm. So again, we've got the kill dry setup because we're in parallel. Here's our mix settings. Now let's go through some of these. This is a good one to show you the different tabs that you've got on the delay block. You can diffuse the input if you want. This gets wild. Kind of turns it into a reverb. So you can do that. The compander is like a compression on the repeats that you can adjust. Now you've got modulation. You'll see here that I've got a little bit of depth on the first LFO and on the second LFO, but not on the third. So you can change. I've got different types of mod on here. And by default, again, Fractal has these things dialed in by default when you just pull this block in that emulate the actual pedal. If you want to come in and tweak it, you can. There's EQ on here. I believe I've tweaked this a little bit, but again, Fractal will shave off high end to replicate the Deluxe Memory Man, what it actually does. And then you can have, you can set to stack and hold. So it'll like give you almost like a pad. I don't actually use this much, but you can map it to a foot switch. I've never really set that up, so I'm not gonna like go into how it works because I'm not exactly sure how it works. I just know you can do it. So that's our main dotted eighth delay that we're gonna use. If you want, you can set another option like a tape or a vintage digital type of a thing. I'm gonna set up some dual delays in the next two channels. So channel B is gonna be dual delay tape, quarter, let's do eighth and dotted eighth. I use that one quite a bit. So we're using the stereo tape algorithm, and we've got it set to dotted eighth delay, but we've got our left-right time ratio set to 66%. What that's going to do is it's going to send a dotted eighth delay left and an eighth delay to the right, and it sounds like this. Okay, you can change the master time, but the feedback is actually, I love how this works. It'll set so that the two delays decay at the same rate. So you can see the right side is a longer feedback because it's a shorter delay. It's an eighth note delay on the right, so it needs more feedback than the dotted eighth on the left. So you can change, give it a lot of feedback. I kind of like to set these up so that they last, maybe on these more ambient delays, maybe a little over a measure, so maybe a little more. Yeah, it lasted like a measure and a half. That's kind of how I like to dial in delays like this. So now we've got a stereo delay that's eighth and dotted eighth. Let's set up one that is quarter note and dotted eighth. I'm going to grab it from my library, but I'll show you exactly how it's set up. Now we're set to quarter note, and to get a quarter note dotted eighth, you want a 75% ratio. So quarter note left, dotted eighth right. Same thing with all of the feedbacks, the way they last, the mix level, the kill dry, mute effects in. Now when it comes to tape delay, you might say, how can I adjust like the way the tape sounds? Because a lot of tape delays will give you the option of like a new tape, a worn tape. So you can get modulation in the modulation section, but in the more section of tape delay, you've got drive and you've got bit reduction. So drive is gonna make it sound older. So let's turn it off, it'll be a more pristine sound. That almost sounds like a digital delay, which is a new tape is going to give you really pristine repeats. If you turn the drive up, it's going to sound gnarly and old. So you can adjust it to taste, and then bit reduction is going to make it sound like that tape needs to be changed. It's like somebody put a fuzz pedal on your delay repeats, which can be a really cool thing. All like super tweakable within this block. Now you've got modulation, EQ, then you can do the stack and hold thing with any of these channels. Now on the last block, I like to set up an ambient delay. I think I call it ambi wash. So what I've done here is I've got a vintage digital delay. I've got a quarter note and a dotted eighth note on either, so I've got a dual set up, but on the diffusion, I'm diffusing the input. So it's going to kind of turn into a reverb. That's really cool, especially when you run it. I run this specifically with very ambient sounds like swells. You can see the mix level is really high. All the rest of this, kill dry, you got to make sure when you're in these parallel modes that kill dry is turned on. Okay, let's come back here and do reverbs. So we got, chorus, we got our modulation, we got delays. Now we need some reverbs. So reverb 1 and reverb 2. We're going to do the same thing. Our reverbs are also in parallel. So we're going to set that routing up exactly the same way. Okay. Now, reverb 1, I like to use as sort of my my subtle type of a reverb. So whether you like that to be a plate reverb, a hall reverb, a spring, here are the options. There are 77 reverb algorithms in the Fractal Reverb Block. Let's just take a moment to respect and appreciate that Fractal has given us to date 77. More coming, probably. These things sound fantastic. They go anything from like spring reverb to small hall plate, south church, the different spaces. You've got crazy. I'll show you some of my favorites. We're not going to go through all these things. This is not a video about reverb, but everything from like a spring reverb in an amp to just crazy spaces to outer space you can get with these blocks. So I'm going to pull in the one I use the most. It's the gold plate subtle. I actually have been running it a little more subtle than this. So this is what it sounds like. Just the reverb is on. So you can hear it's there, but it's not, it's fairly subtle. You can even come down a little bit, especially when you start pushing drive through it. It's going to really, you don't want too much of it there when on your subtle verb. So you've got input diffusion again. Well, let's go through these options on the basic tab. You've got pre-delay. You can do the stack hold thing here. Time, size. Pre-delay has basically you can add a delay into the reverb. I mean, reverb is just a bunch of delays mixing together, really. You've got plate diffusion, dispersion. Because this is a plate, you can change the way the plate sounds here. You can change the way the decay sounds, whether it's got more low end, more high end, the echo density. And then finally, you come to, this is an important one, and we're going to get, you can see that we're pushing our CPU now. We haven't looked at this in a while. We're at 74%. You'll notice at 80%, it gets red. You do not want to go over 80% much. I do sometimes, but the unit you can risk it locking up and turning your audio off if you go over. So one thing I like to do is you can run your reverbs at ultra high level and it'll change. If you watch the CPU, it's going to kind of dance a little bit. Ultra high, high, normal, and economy. It didn't change a lot. We went from around 76% to around 74%. So, but every little bit helps. I've noticed that you can kind of hear a difference, especially on the big ambient reverbs. But on these more subtle reverbs, I don't mind running them in economy. I don't love it. It's kind of why I want to buy an AXFX Mark II or AX3 Mark II Turbo. So I can get a little more out of it. But we've got a plate. If you like a hall, you can do a subtle hall. It sounds like this. I like that plate. I like the way it trails more than the hall. But you can tweak all that stuff. Let's say you like a spring. Let's do a spring subtle. This is the deluxe spring, so it's based on a deluxe reverb Fender. Okay, some of them, like the spring, for example, doesn't give you the quality drop down. Okay, so in the advanced tab, you've got more diffusion options. You can have it duck. You can put modulation on it. Some of this stuff will be more apparent with bigger verbs. You can adjust the EQ. You can make it darker, brighter. You can add pitch shifting to any reverb. Oh, I love this so much. We'll talk about this in the big verbs, which are coming next. Let's dial in some big verbs. So I use Reverb 1 for my subtle always on plate. I don't turn it off much. I use Reverb 2 for the big stuff. And I've got a lot of, I love so many of these. I've really kind of been into their emulation of an Eventide black hole, because I have a black hole and an H90, and I really like the way those sound. So I'm gonna do the black hole pre, and it sounds like this. Man, it sounds good. Let's turn it on. And I've actually A-B'd this to my actual black hole pedal with the settings I like, and it's very, very close. On these big verbs, when they're in a parallel situation like this, I like running them around 30-ish%. I feel that's a pretty good balance. Of course, you can change the size and the decay so it lasts longer. It's beautiful. All right, I'm going to show you a few more of my favorites in here. One of them that I like a lot is the ice castle. I don't know what it's based on. It's really nice. So there were some differences between Deep Space and Ice Castle. All right, let's do some clouds, and then I'm going to show you one of my favorite things with reverb. It's this crazy big one with pitch shifting. So like, here's a cloud verb. Cloud 1 is the Nimbostratus. And again, these library files they're actually all from our stereo amps pack. We included all these library files, but it's just this Nimbostratus that I've just got dialed in. You can see it just changed because I loaded it again, which kind of loads some factory stuff. So let's go back to Cloud 1. It sounds like this. Again, remember at 32% mix. It's much more wispy sounding. It's like a cloud reverb. And again, you've got all these options here. Finally, let's do one of my favorite things. This is called Pleiades. I don't know how you pronounce it. It's like a something in the solar system. It's like a galaxy cluster or something. I don't know. I call it Huge. Pleiades Huge. And I'll show you. I'm just going to play it a little bit because it's pretty stunning how good it sounds. That's very, very good. Okay, so here's like your basic tab. Again, kill dry, mute effects in. I've got the mix really high on this, 73%. Again, because we're in parallel, we can go all the way to 100, and our original signal is going to stay unchanged. It's going to be in there. That's one of the reasons I like the parallel routing, because your original signal comes through. It doesn't get super washed out. There are things you can do to do that. But there was some shimmer magic going on here, and I'm using the pitch shift. So you've got two voices. I've got one of them down an octave, one up an octave, and then you can adjust the balance between the voices. So at 50%, or at 0% rather, you've got equal up and down. And then I ran it over here, so I'm favoring the low octave. So it's almost like an anti-shimmer. Then you can add some modulation. You can high cut it, which I've got at around 2000 hertz. You can add feedback, which is going to give you more repeated like delay stuff. I've got it at 32%, but man, that pitch shifting, it just makes it magic. I'll turn it off and then bring it in. It's beautiful, isn't it? Okay, at this point, I mean, you could roll with this on a Sunday for most anything. You've got multiple levels of drive, you've got chorus, you've got lots of delays, lots of reverbs. We've basically dialed in 8 delays and like 6 reverbs. We didn't get every channel of every block on the reverbs. We've got 4 different types of chorus. But we're not done. Let's add some more stuff. So one thing I really like to do, first of all, I need an extra block. So I'm going to move some stuff over. So I'm going to move this over like this. So I'm going to open myself up a block because I forgot to add, one of the things I really like to do is use pitch to get a MicroPitch type of a sound. So I'm going to put the pitch 2 block in. So we've got pitch 1 here. We haven't talked about it yet. We'll come to it here in a bit. So pitch 2, we didn't take a big hit on the CPU usage, which is nice. The way they've coded these things is great. So I'm going to set up a couple channels for this block. I'm going to use it for, first, a MicroPitch setting. I love MicroPitch from Eventide. I like to use it as like a chorus. So off and then on. To me, it's a very warm type of a chorus, and it works really well with drive. Thank you, Eddie Van Halen, for showing us how that works. I'm going to set 2 POG type setups in channels B and C, and I've got these dialed in for after drives, so there's a pretty heavy high cut happening to sort of tame the high end. But it uses this dual chromatic algorithm. Here are all the pitch algorithms, many, virtual capo, whammies. We're going to talk about whammy in a bit. All these different things you can use. The dual chromatic is what I'm using for POG. So you can see I've got voice 1 is shifted up an octave, voice 2 is down an octave. I've got a little bit of detuning happening, and then I think the level on the up octave is at 100%, level on the down octave is around 50%. And I've got a 21%, 22% mix. So this is just a POG, like a subtle POG. More up than down. And then in channel 3, I'm going to add a bigger, a less subtle POG. So basically it's a lot of the same, just a higher mix. Okay. So those are really the 3 channels I'm going to use in this pitch block. Pitch 2. All right, let's get into some cool stuff here. I'm gonna set up 1 channel, and it's gonna be my Digitech Whammy. I think I've got another one set, Whammy with the expression. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the expression, one of the expression pedals, and we're gonna control this Whammy. So first of all, you can see I'm using the classic Whammy out of these. I could use the advanced, but the classic gives me a tone that I like. The settings are, the mix is at 74%, and I've got this high cut in here so it doesn't get too crazy. I've increased the level because it needs to match. Now what we're going to do is we're going to map the control of the Whammy. You can see that's how you get the sound. So we need to map the control to my second expression pedal, which is plugged into EXP2 of the FC controller. So you right click. I want to control this with FC1. So I only have 1 FC controller. You can plug in 4 if you want. It's crazy. I have 1 FC controller, and it's in the pedal 2 input. And if I come over here and I move it, you can see it's mapped. Now you can change a lot of this stuff in here if you want to. I don't find that I need to. One thing you might want to change is the slope to give it more of a log curve. But for this, I like a linear curve. And the other thing is I only want it to adjust this into channel A. You change this because if you leave it on all channels, now it's going to affect that control if it exists in all the channels. So I only want channel A. So now what I've got is I've got the Whammy set to the controller. We're not done though. It sounds like this. I love Whammy. It's so cool. But I want this to set up so that I don't have to turn the block on. I want it to turn on only when I step on the expression pedal, and I want it to turn off when the expression pedal comes down to 0. So we go back to the controller mapping. There's an auto engage section. I set the auto engage. Let's just do some experimentation, shall we? Let's set to slow position. I think that means when I start to move the pedal, it will, you noticed here, the pitch block turned off because I'm in the down position. As I move the expression pedal, that pitch block will turn on and things will start happening. Love it. It works. So I don't have to control this block with a foot switch. I don't have to step on anything. If I want a whammy up, I just step on this thing and it turns on and goes at any time. As long as I'm on channel A of this block, which is why I use 2 pitch blocks, because I like one dedicated to the whammy, and then I like the other one in a different location in the signal chain, and I like it doing things like Pog and MicroPitch. Those 2 specifically, Pog and MicroPitch. There's one effect that I like to use a lot, and that's tremolo. And I've experimented with different places, and one thing that I enjoy doing with tremolo is I like to turn it on and feel the effects of it with a lot of reverb and stuff. And I've found often that if you put trem in front of all your delays and reverbs, that when you turn it on, if delays and reverbs are on, you often don't feel the trem that much because all of those wet effects are happening on top of it or after it. So I like to add the trem. Actually, it's in a weird position, but I like to put it right here in between sort of the 2 reverbs. So now it's the tremolo is going to affect all the delays and the clean signal that runs parallel to the reverbs. And I have a few trem settings that I like, and I'm going to show you something that's a lot of fun. Why can I not find trem? Tremolo panner. There it is. So I'm going to add the trem in here. I have like this VCA trem, which is just, I'll show you what these all sound like after I get them loaded in. I've got a ramping, nope, we're going to do ramping next. I've got this harmonic trem. I've got the ramping trem, and I've got a chop trem. So let's just go one after the other. So VCA trem. That is not mapped to tempo, but you can. So it's set at 3.44444 hertz. Well, not anymore, 472. The harmonic trem is just a different type. I love that. It's more like an amp type of a trem, what would come on an old amplifier. Now, the ramping trem, I don't have this set up just yet. So let's set this up. First thing, let's save the preset. The ramping trem is going to, we're going to move the rate of it. So I'm going to attach the rate to the LFO, which you can see is just going at this point, right? Now in Fractals, so right now it sounds a little wild. Watch this. It's ramping, but not the way we want. So in the Fractal universe, you can come here to controllers. All of these controllers are available to you. We've got LFOs. We've got these ASDR controllers. We've got a sequencer. You can attach any parameter that has a little button, this little circle. You can attach the gain of your overdrive to like a sequencer. It's kind of nuts. You can come up with some crazy stuff. So we're going to go in here, and you've got control switches, which we'll talk about in a bit, but I'm using the LFO. And Bradford and I spent many, many painstaking hours, maybe not that many, but several painstaking hours recreating the ramping tremolo on his Chase Bliss trem, whatever the trem is that he does, he uses it. And we saved it into the library. So here is our LFO ramping trem setting. You can just screenshot this and copy it. And I'm actually going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to paste it in our settings from one of our existing presets. And I copied it to the clipboard, and now I'm going to paste it to this channel. So now what we've got is we've got the speed of the tremolo is mapped to LFO1. And then you can, again, copy and paste these settings right here. And this is how it ramps up and down. So it's going to follow this sort of logarithmic curve. Check this out. That's super cool. So that's in channel C and only in channel C, because you don't want that happening to your other. If you set this to all, now all your tremolo rates are going to ramp up and down. You only want it set to channel C, so only channel C's tremolo rate moves around, and the rest of them are fixed. Okay, so tremolo is in. I want to do one more thing though, because I like excess when it comes to these things. We're at 74% CPU usage currently, so we got a little more. So I'm going to add the Plex Delay Block because it does some crazy stuff that I really, really enjoy. So we're going to add it again in parallel. I'm going to set up a few things that I love for ambient tones. So I'm going to pull in the library here. I've got this a few presets that I've set up called Prism Shifter. The reason I call it Prism Shifter, it uses the Plex shift algorithm. So in the Plex Delay, you've got all these different options to do crazy stuff. We're not going to go through all of them right now. The H90 from Eventide came out, and it had this algorithm called Prism Shift, and it did like this pitch shifting thing that was just so cool. Look, our CPU is bumped up. So I copied it with the Prism, the Plex Shift block in the Plex Delay. It sounds like this. So what you're hearing is delay and pitch all happening at the same time, moving around in the stereo field, and there's diffusion, so it kind of sounds like reverb, but when you pair this with reverb, it's awesome. All right, in block B, I'm gonna set up some huge reverb type sounds. I'm gonna set one up that is called Plex Verb Huge. So this uses the Plex Verb setting, and it's just really big reverb. Sounds like this. It's big. You can hear it. All right. Another one that I like is this thing called depths. It's uses the ambient depths algorithm. It's just another type of very ambient reverb. These are beautiful sounding reverbs, and you could use them in place of Reverb 2 if you wanted to use the Plex Delay Block for your ambient reverbs. It also has a shimmer that sounds really, really nice. So this is the shimmer algorithm. It's called the golden shimmer. And these are the settings I like. I mostly use the Plex Shift and the Plex Verb, and I'll use it for my big ambient sounds. I think that's it. That's everything. We're pretty much out of CPU. I'd have to buy another Axe-Fx 3 to get more in. Before we move on to setting up like the controller and all the switching and everything like that, let's talk about scenes. So scenes are groupings of effects that turn on and off at the same time. You can think, if you're familiar with snapshots in Helix, it's the same thing. All those scenes predate snapshots by many, many, many years and generations of hardware. So right now what we have is we're on scene 1. I actually already named it. It's clean, and we have 8 scenes. So we're gonna start clean, and then we're gonna go through drive, and then we're gonna do some other things in scenes 5 through 8. So I basically have my clean scene on the way I like it. I've got a compressor on, I've got this delay on, I've got this reverb on. It's basically my clean tone. Now, I want, the next scene is going to be drive 1. So there's a couple things you can do. You can just go over to it, and some stuff is on and some is not. Looks like drive 1 is already on. You can copy scene 1 to scene 2. And that way, when you go to scene 2, it'll say clean. But you can turn this drive on. Now, it's turned on, so it's on. So you don't really have to do anything. You don't have to save it in between. It's done. If we go to scene 3, I want the compressor on, the delay on, the reverb on, and I want the ODR1 on. And we're going to call this drive 2. So let's hear it. So we've gone from drive clean to drive 1 to drive 2, basically 2 stages of drive. I want to set up an ambient lead sound. So let's just kind of build it from scratch. So the compressor is on. I want the Sunrise Splendor on. I want the ODR1 on. So both of my drives are stacked. I know that I want this dual delay. Which dual delay do I want, though? Do I want dotted eighth and quarter? Or eighth and dot. Let's do eighth and dotted eighth. We'll turn that on. And I want my black hole reverb on. And because this is a lead sound, I want my solo boost, my volume boost on. So you can hear going from like drive 2 to that gives you a bit of a volume boost, especially because usually in your rhythm tone you're going to be playing like chords, or power chords, something like that, and then you go to this big lead and it gives you a little volume boost over the top when you're playing single note stuff. A lot of people ask us, like, these scenes are all over the place. I wouldn't play huge chords with the lead scene. That's probably why, the volume. Okay, so we've got basically our clean, our drive 2, lead. Now let's do an ambient clean sound. So we're gonna do, let's see, what kind of delay? We want the gold plate on, we want the deep space on. Let's do the other dual delay. So this is the quarter note and dotted eighth delay. It sounds like this. Sounds nice. All right, so we'll call that ambi clean. All right, let's see. We got 6, 7, and 8. 8, I know I want to be like swells. So I want the Plex shift on. I want, sure, let's have our eighth note delay. That's not going to do a lot. Remember in channel D here, we set up our huge ambient delay sound. We're going to have our gold plate on. Why not? And then we'll have this big pitch shifty Pleiades reverb. It sounds like this. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? Let's do it right now. We didn't map our volume block in. Let's just put it right here so I can do some swells. We want volume 1. And we're going to map the volume to FC1 pedal 1. Remember the mapping we already went over. And then I'm going to change the slope so it's a little more of a logarithmic curve. Now, I've got my big volume block here, and I can move it up and down. Swells. Those sound amazing. They really do. Okay, so let's make up a few more sounds. Maybe we do like a chorus type of a clean. So like ambi mod. I like those kinds of sounds. We have a couple options. I want to use a dotted eighth delay. I want to use the deep space, the black hole reverb. Now for our chorus sound, we can either use the tri-chorus. It would sound like this. Or we can use the MicroPitch setup that we have. It would sound like this. So I think the tri-chorus is a little better for this kind of a sound. I like them both, honestly. I could go either way. Now, in scene 7, I'm going to set up a POG lead sound. So there's an easy way to do this. We can go back to scene 4, which is our P&W lead sound. All we want to do is add a POG to it. We can copy that, and we can copy it to scene 7. So now when we go to scene 7, it's P&W lead. We can change this, though, to POG lead, and then turn our POG on, so channel B. So now it's the P&W lead sound with the POG on, and it sounds like this. Sounds cool to me. So now we have 8 scenes set up. Clean, drive 1, drive 2, P&W lead, ambient clean, ambi mod, POG lead, and swells. Now let's map stuff to the foot switch. I'm actually going to pop over to that original preset that I showed you because we've essentially recreated the whole thing. It would take a long time to recreate all the foot switch mapping. I'm going to show you how it's done though. First thing you do is come over to your FC edit. So this is your FC controller. Now the FC controllers, I'll demonstrate. The FC controllers have 8 layers. They actually have 9, but you don't want to mess with the 9th one. This is just the flexibility of the Fractal stuff is insane. So you've got 9 layers, and to access all the layers, you rock the right 2 buttons. Now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers. They don't let you edit the 9th layer because it's the master layer. You can mess things up if you do that. Those correspond to the 8 layouts. I called them layers. They're layouts. The 8 layouts here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you can, you can name them whatever you want. I live in layout 7 and 8 because those are like the user layouts. Now what you can do is, layout 1 is presets. So you push that and it brings up your presets. So you can select a preset. Layout 2 is scenes, and you can change all of these here, what they are. So this is basically all of the scenes from my template. Layout 3, effects, channels. Looper is a nice one. These are all stock. I have not changed these from stock. So 3 is effects, channels, looper, and what you see on this screen will correspond to what you see on the FC12. I use 7 and 8. So on 7 we call scenes, WT scenes, and on 8 is effects. So I'll show you how each one of those is set up, but before I do, we have to go to the per preset mapping. So per preset mapping means you can take any of these 24 different mapping instances, PP1, 2 through 24, and you can make them whatever you want them to be on a per preset basis, and then you can use those in whatever layout you want. So I have per preset mapping for every preset. These can be a pain to change if you want to change them. So the first 8 are like on a bunch of presets, but if you kind of have them all the same, you just copy one, copy a preset and then change it, and you've got the mapping all set. All right, the first 8 PP values or PP settings are the scenes. So this is going to be, you come down here to function and you can change what it does. Scene, I want to select it, scene 1. Second press does nothing. Scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, scene 5, scene 6, scene 7, and scene 8. 9 through 20 are going to be effects that I want to use on different buttons. So PP9 is drive, so I've selected the category effect. I'll do this once and then, we won't have to do it for every one. I want to select a specific channel because I'm going to select drive 1 block A. So I want drive 1, I want channel A, not block, channel A. The second press is going to be smart bypass, which just means if it's on, it's going to turn it off. If it's off, it's going to turn it on. And I want to call it a custom name. You can either have the short name and channels, so it'd be drive 1A, long name, DR1A, drive 1A, or custom. This is my morning glory. And a morning glory is a goldish kind of a color, so I'm going to color it. Maybe I'll go orange, because that maybe looks like a morning glory, or yellow. One of the two. PP10 is drive 2A. Drive 2A is the ODR1, if you remember how we had that set up. PP11 is delay 1A. That's my 8th note tape. PP12 is delay 2A. Remember on delay 1, I just had the 8th note and quarter note delays. PP12 is delay 2A. That's the 8th note deluxe memory, dotted 8th deluxe memory man. PP13 is delay 2B. Remember in delay 2, I have all those other delays set up. So then I can go to dual stereo delay. It's actually 8th and dotted 8th. So I just have those 3 delay mappings set up. 8th note, dotted 8th, dual. Now we move on to reverb. So PP14 is reverb 1A. That's that plate reverb, that golden plate. PP15 is reverb 2A, and that's where we had the black hole reverb set up. If you have, PP2, if you wanted to go to channel B, which was the ice castle, I think D was cloud, you can do either one. Now on PP15, I have my first dual function set up. So you can either push the button and have it do something, and you can have a hold function. So on the hold function, I'm going to go to reverb 2, and I'm going to go to channel D, which if you remember was that Pleiades huge thing with the pitch shifting. So I'm going to have one button that's going to allow me either turn black hole on or hold it and turn on that humongous Pleiades thing. I'll show you what that looks like in a bit when we get to the FC controller. All right, next I've got the tremolo. So I have the same type of thing. If I press the button, it's going to give me tremolo channel A, which is just a regular old tremolo. If I press and hold, I get tremolo channel C, which if you remember was the ramping trim. So I can get that ramping trim at any time from that one button. PP17 is my chorus. It's chorus A. We could call this tri-chorus if we wanted to, because that's what I have in channel A. Now PP18, I've got set up to do something pretty interesting. So the first thing I have it doing is, if you remember on the pitch, that second pitch block, I have the MicroPitch set up and the pogs, right? So I'm going to have this be my MicroPitch button. So if I press it, it goes to pitch 2, channel A, that's MicroPitch. If I hold it, it's going to go to Plex Block channel A, which is that pitch shifty thing. That's how we had it set up. So it's kind of like a pitch block, a pitch button. You can either do MicroPitch or the pitch shifty reverby thing, which is awesome. All right, I don't have anything on 19. It's going to be open. Then on 20 is where I have another overdrive option set up. So I can either press it and go to my OCD, or press and hold and get to my fuzz. Now 21, 2, 3, and 4 are sort of utility things that I use all the time. So on 21, and they're actually in the utility category, is tap tempo. And I want to display the BPM. So I can tap it and it will display what I tap. And then if I hold it, it's like tapping tuner, basically. If I hold it, I go to the tuner and it displays the function. You'll see what it looks like on the thing. All right, 22, 3, and 4 are specialty buttons that I'm going to use. So in I want to be able to flip between the layouts. So I'm using 7 and 8. Layout 7 is scenes, layout 8 is effects. I want to be able to press a button and switch between the two, so I can always go from effects to scenes. I'm replicating what the line 6 helix does, really, is what I'm doing. So on 22, the category is layout. I'm going to increase the layout by 1. And then I have a wrap set so that it starts at 7 and goes to 8. So it increases by 1, and it goes from 8 to 7 to 8 to 7 to 8 to 7. So every time you press it, it's just going to flip-flop between 7 and 8. If you wanted it to flip-flop between 3 different scenes, or 3 different layouts, you could change it to, you could change the lower limit to 6. Then it would go 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, 8, 6, 7, 8, the more, however you press it. So that's how I have that one set up. Then I have 2 buttons that I like to use in scene mode because I use scene mode for songs. And I want to be able to go up and down per a preset. So PP23 is going to increase 1 preset, and it's going to wrap. The lower limit is 0, the upper limit is 1023. So that's all the presets. There's 1023 presets. And then PP24 is going to decrease a preset. So I have a button to go up a preset, a button to go down a preset. Now what you can do is you can map all of these per preset mappings. You can set them to individual foot switches. So pretend this is our FC12 in front of us. Here it is right here. I'm going to select layout 7. So now I'm looking at layout 7. So what we see on the screen is displaying on the FC controller. So first of all, this is scenes. So my internal 8 buttons are going to be scenes. PP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And those will correspond to the different scenes that we set up. So we can swap between all 8 of our scenes. Only 8 scenes available on the Axe-Fx. And then on the outside, I'm going to put those utility switches in. So the bottom left button is going to be my tap tempo tuner. The button right above that is going to be the one that I press to switch between scenes and effects. And then on the right on top, I'm going to go preset up. On the right on the bottom, preset down. So that corresponds to what you see here. I can change scenes, right? I can go between the 2 layouts, 7 and 8. I can tap. And I can hold to tune. And so I'm tuning as we speak. All right, so that is layout 7. Layout 8 is where my effects come in. All right, so again, I have the same 2 utility buttons on the left, the tuner, the tap and the tuner, and then the scenes and effects button, so I can swap between those 2 layouts. And then I like to line up my drives on the bottom. So I've got the Morning Glory, I've got the ODR1, and then you can see here it's showing me that I have that hold function programmed in. So here, if I tap it, it's going to turn on the OCD. If I hold it, it's going to turn on the fuzz. On this button, if I tap it, it's going to give me MicroPitch. If I hold it, it's going to give me the Plex shift, black hole, or Pleiades if I hold it. And then I've got that tape delay here. I've got PP12, which is Deluxe Memory Man. I've got PP13, which is dual stereo delay. I've got the trem, but if I hold, I get ramping trem. And then I have my chorus set up there as well. It's kind of complex until you wrap your brain around how it all works. If you have presets of ours, you get all this mapping in them. And we only use 7 and 8 because those 2 are not set up. Those don't have factory setups from Fractal. Now that we've gone through how the mapping works, I just want to show you how you can practically use this in like a in a stomp setup. And I can just turn stuff on and off. I'll show you a few things, and you'll see it reflected on Axe Edit as well. So that was all the tricks I had up my sleeve. I did the crazy big reverbs all from this one layout. I did the, the whammy thing up and down, the ramping trim. Of course, you can do much more complicated programming with the scenes if you want to do very specific sounds. This was a long one. If you're still with me, thank you so much. I hope that you've learned something that Axe-Fx and Fractal devices can do that maybe you didn't know it could do, or if you had questions about how powerful is this thing. The Fractal, like the Axe-Fx 3, with an FC controller and a foot switch and an expression pedal, is literally twice the price of like a Helix. So you might ask, is it really twice as good? Well, hopefully now you can make that decision with a little more information behind whether or not it would be worth it if you're thinking about switching over to something with a little more power and flexibility. We have Fractal presets. I'll link to them below for Axe-Fx 3, FM3, FM9. Now the sounds across the other FM units, 9 and 3, are similar. Like the algorithms are the same. Axe-Fx 3 gets firmware updates faster than FM3 and FM9, but for the most part, Fractal keeps them all at the same level as far as the way that like the amp blocks sound, for example. You can just do far less with the 9 and the 3. The 9 is actually pretty powerful. It can do almost everything this can do. The 3 is much less powerful when it comes to running dual amps, DSP usage, things like that. Like I said, I love Axe-Fx. It is my favorite unit to use live. It's my favorite all-in-one modeling device. It kind of breaks my heart sometimes when I play through amps and then I come to Axe-Fx and I'm able to make it sound just as good. It doesn't break my heart for the Axe-Fx. It breaks my heart for the amps because it's like they should sound better, right? They should, maybe. I don't know. That's a topic for a different day. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one.